That was Aaliyah more than a woman. So today is Donald Trump's last full day as president, and I must tell you, this has been the worst season of Apprentice ever. A lot has changed. I'm flashing back to 2 weeks ago when the Capitol was being overrun and insurrection started. I saw so many harrowing images. I saw images of people screaming and running. Images of police officers. The one that I can't, like, I think about all the time. He was pressed against the glass, and they were trying to strip his mask off of him, and he was screaming. We know that as many as 60 to 70 police officers needed medical attention. One of them was beaten so bad with a flagpole that he might lose his eye. Another was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. And none of this time did a rubber bullet get fired, did tear gas get used, did force get used. None of this. As a matter of fact, one officer, he said, he spoke about the fear that he had. He talked about using his gun, but he knew that he didn't have enough firepower, and he'd soon be overpowered again. Except this time, they would probably use his gun against him, and they'd have all the reason to end his life. So after that, he thought his only option was to peer to somebody's humanity. And I just remember yelling, "I have kids," and it seemed to work. So when he was afraid for his life, there was actual fear. He was fearing for his life. Not the fear you're trained to say that you have when you shoot an unarmed suspect. The real fear that is innate in you. You actually used reason. You knew that force would only escalate things. You knew that even though you feared for your life, you knew that force would escalate things. That man, that young man who was screaming, he had a gun too. And other police officers had guns. And they watched him almost lose his life. He could have potentially died right in front of them. No one fired a shot. No one screamed. No one did escalated the force. Another man's beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. And I'm sure that some of the officers around watched this. And they too had to be afraid for your life. They say prayer changes things, but so does fear. Now, a lot of people believe, and maybe it's somewhat true, that they had an alliance with those people, that they had a kinship with them. But I believe that they felt some level of fear. They really felt, if I use force, they will use it back. It's not the fear that they're trained to talk about. Oh, I thought he had a gun, or I thought he would get, I didn't know how to react, or he's bigger and stronger. They actually feared for their lives, and it restrained them. This fear wasn't born out of self-restraint. This restraint was born out of fear. They feared that if they used force, it would be used back against them. Because they feared that the same force they meted out would be used against them. So fear changed the outcome. Isn't it different than the fear they have when they think you have a gun, or the fear they have when it turns out to be a phone? Fear can also lead to restraint. It isn't, when I first saw this thing, I thought it was because they agreed with them, and maybe that's true. But that is what fearing for your life actually looks like when you think there'll be a penalty to pay. Not a financial penalty, not being a pariah in society, not losing your job, but losing your life. This man said he didn't use his gun, he appealed to their humanity. He shouted out, "I have kids," hoping to appeal to them. Hoping that force wouldn't escalate. That is the epitome of de-escalation. When you appeal to someone's humanity to live, that is the epitome of de-escalation. So their fear caused them not to act in a way that would escalate the situation, not to act in a way that could lead to further death, to further loss of life. That doesn't happen where we're from. That doesn't happen in our situations. They use force because they don't fear any. The only way a man could lean on a man's neck for 9 minutes, as casually as he did it with his hand in his pocket, because there was no fear that anything would happen. And as much and as horrible as fear is, it saves lives sometimes. It saves lives sometimes. I ask you this in all sincerity. Why is it that only black people have to ask for permission to live? We have to take to the streets to beg for the right to exist. How many times have we heard, "Oh, well, I was afraid for my life. I really thought it was all over. I didn't know what to do." Now we know you know what to do. We know what it looks like when you actually, really, truly, deep down in your bones, fear for your life. That is a little note from the GED section. We got the Jazz Report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.